Hold on.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to In Pursuit of Purpose, which is our LinkedIn Live series dedicated to exploring the profound significance of purpose in our lives, and especially in our careers. I'm Danielle Posa, founder of The Wellbeing Hacker, and joining me is the amazing Nicole Carline, president of The Wellbeing Hacker, and also head coach of our Legacy Builder program. For over 20 years, I've basically been obsessed with one question, which is what does a meaningful career in life look like so that more people can achieve this to elevate well-being in society. And in a nutshell, all the work that we do is really centered around elevating well-being. And we do this by coaching individuals or consulting with organizations on how to build culturally integrated well-being strategies. So together, we're really here to spark a conversation about why feeling a deep sense of purpose is not just a luxury, but a necessity for meaningful work and life. So in each session of this series, we'll dive into why many of us feel stuck in the corporate grind and how we can break free from that. And pursue work that not only pays the bills, but really fills our soul. So whether you're somebody who's contemplating a job change or a career shift, or just really seeking more meaningful or more fulfillment in your current role, this is a conversation for you. So please, we encourage you to interact with us, ask questions, comment, and just kind of push yourself to explore new possibilities and give yourself permission to engage in this conversation today. So thank you so much for being here. And over to you, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. So excited to have our amazing guest today, Michael Chitwood. I'm just going to introduce him in a moment. And thanks, Danielle, for opening it up. Guys, we definitely want to have this as a highly engaging session. So definitely ask your questions, bring comments into the chat, and we'll keep an eye on it. We'll certainly include those as we go through today's discussion. So I truly can't express how excited I am to have not only a great friend on today's episode, but one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met on the planet, Michael Chitwood. I met Michael and his equally amazing wife, Dani, almost 15 to 16 years ago when I was living in the Midwest, and I had the pleasure of getting to know them really well and starting, I spent a lot of time with them together. And when Danielle and I came up with this LinkedIn Live event, In Pursuit of Purpose, Michael was one of the first names that came to mind as a guest because he's the epitome of truly living a life with intention and purpose. And so let me introduce you to Michael so we could get started with this conversation ASAP. Michael is currently the CEO of Marillac St. Vincent Family Services, which is a nonprofit agency providing innovative programs and services that transform lives and uplift families throughout the Chicago area. He's the founder of Team World Vision, the endurance run, walk, ride fundraising program of World Vision, where $100 million has been raised for global clean water projects since inception in 2006. He's the author of the book, The Ability to Endure, and he's a public speaker, inspiring people to take action towards ending global poverty and injustice. Guys, this is just a snippet of Michael's accomplishments and the work he's done. There's so much more that we're going to unpack on a much deeper level today. And I really want this audience to think about some things as we hear more about Mike's journey. I want you to thinking about some of the questions that you're asking yourself, like, what does it mean for you to live a life of purpose? Do you know, or have you done any work to start uncovering your own purpose? And what kind of impact do you believe you can make? So, Michael, we'd love for you to start by sharing a bit of your current role as CEO of Marillac St. Vincent Family Services and just a brief overview of your version of how you got to where you are today. And then, of course, we're going to spend the majority of time, just unpacking the rest of your fascinating story here.
Sure. Sure. Well, as you said, I'm the CEO at Marillac St. Vincent Family Services. We are an agency that's been around for over 100 years, serving families in Chicago who are living at or below the poverty line. And we serve families at every stage in life, from prenatal care for young moms all the way through senior citizens. And we have several locations in Chicago on the north and west side of Chicago, and about a staff of about 170-ish folks who have dedicated their lives to living with purpose and serving our fellow Chicagoans.
Wow.
So as you kind of shared, and we'll dive into my story a little bit more, but I spent the previous 17 and a half, 18 years in global development, working for humanitarian organizations, working to help eradicate extreme global poverty in majority world countries around the world. So I've been to Africa 23 times, I think, to rural communities to visit World Vision's work and Opportunity International's work in those countries. Been to Central and South America, but most of my international travels was spent in rural Africa, and formed some deep relationships there, and spent a lot of time trying to understand why poverty exists.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of my story. And then, just over a year ago, decided that I wanted to spend this next season of my career investing locally here in Chicago while staying engaged globally as a volunteer.
Yeah, well, can you tell? So yeah. So as Nicole said, your story is really fascinating, and I think there's so many different paths of purpose that people can take, right? And you took one that is more in the nonprofit world. Like, where did this, especially this focus on like tackling poverty, like where did that initially come from?
Sure. Well, I grew up pretty comfortable. I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in a suburb of Grand Rapids, Michigan, in a pretty comfortable community. I didn't really experience poverty as a kid. Wasn't exposed to people with very different backgrounds or life experiences than I was having. It. Most of the people around me looked like me, lived like me, had similar experiences and families to mine. After college, I started teaching fifth grade down in Kankakee, Illinois, about an hour south of Chicago, where 98% of the students in my classroom lived at or below the poverty line. And the first person I ever met experiencing homelessness was a little girl in my fifth grade class. And seeing the challenges the students that I was working with were facing just wrecked me in every way. It really opened my eyes to see that not everyone was given the same opportunities that I'd been given. During my few years, I only taught for 3 years, but during those years, I also had the opportunity to travel to Haiti with my dad and mom to lead teacher training trips for Haitian teachers. And for those who don't know, Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It was on that trip that it was the first time I met children with literally no roof over their head, wondering where their next meal was coming from, and my first exposure to extreme poverty. And so came away from those experiences with my heart broken, but not really knowing what to do about that. So left teaching, stayed in family services, ran some youth programs while going to grad school to get my master's in social work, and was really wrestling through what to do next in my life. I had a very jarring experience. Kind of my first year after leaving teaching, I got married and started this youth program. And it was during that first year of marriage, my first year running that youth program, that my dad passed away very suddenly, following what was supposed to be a routine shoulder surgery on his rotator cuff.
Wow, really? Oh my God.
Yeah.
So completely unexpected, should have been in one day, out the next. And it devastated me. It just wrecked my faith, my life, everything I thought I knew about the world was flipped upside down.
Yeah.
Something I took away from that, that my eyes were open to in that experience, was that my dad had spent a lot of his years as an elementary school teacher, doing something he was really good at and that he really enjoyed. But during the last few years of his life, he started leading these trips around the world to help people in extreme poverty. And I saw him come alive in a way I hadn't seen him come alive before.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I love
my heart connection didn't immediately go to, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. Go do something about extreme poverty. But my heart did come alive to the fact that I don't want to be 60 still trying to figure out what I was put on this earth.
Yeah. Wait, can we just well, I know we didn't talk about this, yesterday during our prep but so that's I love, when we decide to kind of call this theme this come alive. And I just love that phrase so much. Can you just describe when you said you saw your dad come alive, what does that, what does that look like? What do you mean by that?
Well, he couldn't help himself from talking about the work. He couldn't help but network and tell everyone he knew and invite people to participate. He was recruiting teachers and partnering with supply companies to bring supplies on the trips. And it was just, I'd seen him, and maybe he had that when he was a younger principal. He was principal of the year in Michigan one year. He was a great principal, but he wasn't coming home from work every day with kind of the spark in his eye that I saw those last few years of his life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just saw that and just said, well, I don't want to be 60
earlier
before I feel that
Right.
way about my life. Yeah.
And see, that is I love that, because that's what, that's the essence of, this purposeful path, right? It's we don't realize the impact, the fact that you picked up on that as a kid. You were how old when you said you saw that in your
I was in college,
you were a little older.
kind of my end of college when he started that. He only got to do it for about 3 or 4 years before he passed.
Wow.
Yeah, well, and see, and that that's so interesting too, right? The fact that somehow that did happen for him, despite the fact that he probably didn't, obviously didn't see his end of life coming. But that's what we aim for, right? Knowing that when people around us, when come alive in that way, it has this impact. It makes this imprint on the people that love you, right? And so I just want to emphasize that point, because that's part of why it's just so important for people to do that, so that your own kids can witness that in you, seeing you come alive, seeing that energy that just starts to come out naturally, where you just want to get others, like you said, other people involved, talking about what you do in a totally different way. So anyway, I just love that. I'm so glad you articulated it that way.
No, that's
definitely. Mike, I love when you talk too about the journey, right? So you truly saw your father come alive, and you started to see the world in a different way as well, because of the exposure, because of the travel that you had. And so then talk to us a little bit about how you started to think about that from a career perspective, your career trajectory, and what were some of the things that you were thinking about doing from a career perspective. And how did you, I'd love the story, especially about Team World Vision. I was part of that. I ran some of those races. So I want to hear, I love hearing it from you and just how you went through that journey.
Sure. Well, it didn't start, like I said, I didn't immediately make a connection that maybe this is what I should do. I would say right when my dad passed, I had just been a school teacher. Several people approached me about taking his role on. They said, maybe you should just take Dad's role and keep leading these teacher training seminars. And I just looked and I said, my dad had 35 years experience as a teacher and principal. I taught for 3 years. I don't think that's my path.
Mm-hmm.
But, so I was very fortunate. I've been very fortunate at different stages of my life to have mentors. And my mentor, Dr. Ron Brown, who's, PhD in organizational leadership, was coaching me during that time and really started meeting with me monthly and saying, okay, you want purpose, you want to figure out what you were put on this earth for, let's dive into that. And he actually started giving me assignments, and we made a list of the top jobs I thought I wanted. right? If you could do anything in the world, what would it be? And looking back on it, it's kind of a ridiculous list, seeing where I wound up. But they were things that appealed to me at the time that I thought sounded exciting. So they were things like be a creative director at an ad agency. That sounded really exciting to me. I'd been an art major for a couple of years in college. One of them was actually to be a stand-up comedian and get on Saturday Night Live. That was like a dream of mine since I was a kid. It sounded
We're going to have you do a joke at the end of this, just so you know.
No, that's long past.
We forgot to tell you that, but.
It was, and as so he gave me assignments. And so the assignment for stand-up comedian was find out what it takes to get a joke on late night TV. Right. So I did the research on that. For creative director, he had me look at my network, see, do I know anyone who knows someone who's a creative director? So a friend of mine connected me with his girlfriend, and I went and spent a day at an ad agency, just exploring, hey, what do you do? What is this job? And each of those pursuits I came away with going, that's not it. Right. Mm-hmm. That's cool. That's great. I had over idealized that idea, that job in my mind. And then when I really looked at that career and that job and who I was, it just didn't line up. Mm-hmm. And so I was in the midst of this journey. The reason I share that is because my heart was softened and searching. I knew I was looking for what it was. Wow. So on a separate track, when my dad died, a couple years after my dad died, a friend of mine invited me to run the Chicago Marathon with him. Mm-hmm. And I was the least likely of any of my friends to run a marathon. I was 265 pounds. I was a former college defensive end in football. And I couldn't run a mile. I'd never run a 5K. Running a marathon was not on my radar at all. But something sparked in me when he told me he was going to run the marathon. And I said, I'm going to do it with him. I'm going to train and do it with him.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that summer, those long, very slow training runs were a space of healing for me, where my faith was restored, my heart was restored, kind of walking through this grief of losing my dad. And by the time I got to the start line of the Chicago Marathon, I had already experienced so much life change that I said, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. Oh. So flash forward 2 years later, I'm training for an Ironman triathlon. I'm out on a 5-hour bike ride. And I had what I can only describe as a vision that I could use these races to help children living in extreme poverty around the world. Mm-hmm. And I started thinking back to the marathons and half marathons and triathlons I'd done the previous 2 or 3 years. And I could remember seeing all these charities there, great charities, but I could only remember seeing medical research charities. I didn't remember seeing anyone who was raising money for people living in the most vulnerable communities in the world.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So following that bike ride, I knew this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do.
Wow.
And
how, like, when you say this is it, like, what was that like when it just kind of clicked? Like, how do you just, because you said those other opportunities, there's something about them that were just not who you were, you said, like, just knew. And it sounds like you've always had maybe like a really good inner compass for like just kind of knowing yourself and being able to like know what your truth is, so that if something is not in alignment with that, to kind of nix that. Not everybody has that. So it's like, what was that kind of clicking moment for you? Like, how did you kind of know that was really the direction you were supposed to go?
Well, in those conversations with my mentor, my coach, he would keep digging. He would ask, why?
That's familiar.
And what is why? I want to be a comedian. Why? I want to be a creative director. Why? Dig into that. Tell me why you think that's it.
Yes.
Yeah. And then he asked this question. I just remember it might have only been a couple times. It seems like he asked me every time. He would say, what do you really want to do that you're afraid to say?
Yes.
Right.
Oh, I love it. Yep.
And
absolutely.
I would say, I want to do something around helping people in poverty, but I don't want to be a missionary. I don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, it wasn't like a 3-month journey. It's like 2 years of this, of journeying and exploring. So that day on that bike ride, I came alive in the moment. I mean, it was a spark. I spent 5 hours. I was It's the farthest ride I'd ever done, 85 miles. It was in Champaign, Illinois, through cornfields. It was hot. I was tired. And all I could think about was, I got to get home to write these ideas down.
Wow.
Oh, I love it.
I got home from this 5-hour bike ride, hopped in my car, drove over to my office because I didn't have a computer at home at the time. And I just started writing all these ideas down.
Yeah.
About this program we could do, this charity running team thing. So.
And that's where, we talked a little bit about, like, there's a big difference between passion and purpose. Like, everybody's all about their, it's just like, oh, finding something that you're passionate about, or having your, like, side hustle to explore your passions and stuff. And that's all good. Like, I'm not, that's better than like just kind of grinding or hating your job. But there's a difference.
Yeah.
You're describing it between when it's purposeful. It's almost like you like channel something, right? Like that something really comes to you in a whole different way that just, enlivens your goal. And I need to reiterate that phrase you said, that your mentor said, like, what do you really want to do that you're afraid to say? That's like gold, I think, because I know that we hear that all the time. Like, we have to really push clients, especially when they're in kind of corporate roles. And I'd say especially men, because I think it's easier as like a woman to say, for some reason, like, just, it's easier to kind of say that you want to have X impact. It's easier to be a little softer on like what matters to you. And I think that for men, and tell me if you have witnessed that or if you feel that, but like, I feel like it's a little harder for men to like, to acknowledge that, hey, there is like more that there is a softer side of me, or there is more that I want to do, and feel like they have to kind of show like strength through the corporate role or the salary and whatever. And so it's like getting to that heart and like listening to your heart, like, is really important, And I mean, do you kind of see that? Feel that at all?
Personally, my mom raised 3 boys. I'm the youngest of 3 boys, and she said, if I'm gonna have 3 boys, they're gonna be sensitive. So I would say I break a lot of gender norms of what people think of.
Oh, I love that.
I'm a sensitive, gushy, crying. Me and my wife are
football player.
Gender roles. I'm a football player. I was one of 2 art majors on the football team, right?
Wow.
And I was, voted most artistic in high school. The captain of the football team doesn't usually fall into that category.
Wow, yeah, that is really...
Although you do hear it more and more that many athletes have like this artistic, creative side and are using it more and more. Yes, definitely. But
what I have witnessed very clearly, and I saw this a lot at World Vision, but I see it in a lot of nonprofit space. World Vision was a perfect space for it because it's a $1 billion charity in the US. It's one of the largest humanitarian orgs in the world. And so there's a deep need for experienced professionals. So like our CEOs, the 2 CEOs I served under came from Fortune 100 companies. Right? Wow. So there's a lot of leaders that I've seen discover late in their career that I want more than what this career is offering me. I want purpose. I want to give to something. And I'll just say this, when I think of purpose, I truly believe that we are made for each other.
Right? I love that.
And that we are designed, it is intrinsic as human beings that we are designed to help and serve one another. That doesn't mean that everyone's purpose is nonprofit, right? You can help and serve people as a coach, as a mentor, as a executive, as a CEO of a Fortune 100 company. You can be living on purpose. But I do think that purpose has to be more than about career path and your own financial gain and status, and that it has to be a meeting of where your passion lines up with a great need in the world.
Yes.
Definitely. Mike, sorry.
I know.
We get so excited about this conversation. I think there's a few things that you said a little bit earlier that just I think we need to go back and highlight, right? You mentioned that there were several different types of careers you can envision yourself in. And I think that's so normal, right? It's such a normal part of life. And sometimes we're not even given the opportunity to really explore that based on the trajectory of our life sometimes. We go to high school, then go to university, and then figure out what you want to do and step into that role. But in the back of our minds, we have ideas of ways and versions of ourselves that we've seen. And I give you a lot of kudos because you actually explored them. You tried it, whether you talked to someone or whether you tried it in a short period of time, but you were able, you didn't have to leave that hanging. You really had this ability to just take the action to figure it out if it was the right path or not. And I think that's really important, right?
Yeah.
But the other piece was just that time that, the time that you were working with your coach and the questions and the prompting, you started to focus more of your attention on the things that you were wanting more of in your life. You couldn't maybe always have the answer right away, but he was really, testing you to dig deeper, further into your soul, not just what your head is saying or not what society expects of you, but to dig deeper. And I think that by even having this outlet of your fitness and those bike rides, like you had the quiet time and space that you were giving to yourself. And that was your time, like when you would have these really big like thoughts, and it was really coming through to you during that time. And when you think about it, a lot of people don't give themselves enough time in the day to even have a thought like that, right? They're just going day by day, schedule to schedule, meeting to meeting, going home. So they don't give themselves that time and that space to really even think about what's possible. And you were able to do that. So I love what you just shared here. Now, I think it would be so helpful for people to understand you had this idea, you write everything down.
Yeah.
How did you now take that next step to actually make it happen? This is the best part.
Yeah.
Well, I pitched the idea to a friend, some connections I had at a smaller nonprofit, and they loved me, but they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. They were like, run a marathon for kids in other, I don't even get this, right? So I sat down, I was at lunch with my best friend, I remember very clearly, and I said, I was like, what do I do? I know this is what I'm supposed to do. This is the path I saw, was to take it to the organization that I had connections at. And he said, you got two choices: start your own nonprofit or find the biggest, best organization out there and take it to them. So I actually started both processes. I talked to a friend, started the paperwork on starting a 501c3. It didn't quite feel right, but I knew I needed a backup plan. And I looked up and did some research on who's doing this work the best. And that's how I found World Vision. And I just looked online. I found that they had an office in Chicago. I lived in Champaign, Illinois, about 2 hours south of the city. Called the top guy on the list. His name was Mike Mantell, who became an incredible coach and mentor. He's the CEO at another global agency now. But he was the head of fundraising for kind of the middle third of the country. I leave him a message, 30 seconds long. Mr. Mantell, my name is Michael. I got an idea for fundraising. Call me if you want. 30 seconds later, my phone rings and it's him. And after I got to know him, I found out that was an anomaly. He did not call people back like that. This guy was getting, he got calls all the time from knuckleheads like me, trying to pitch him something. So
what do you think it was? Why do you think he called you back?
I don't know. Maybe he heard the confidence in my voice and the idea. Maybe it was serendipitous. Maybe it was God's intervention. I don't know. But he shared with me on that call at the end. I shared this idea about running marathons and raising money for kids in other countries. And I said, are you interested? And he said verbatim, Michael, I'm interested in any idea that will help bring more help to the kids we serve. If you're ever in Chicago, look me up. We'll get together for coffee. I can't sleep that night. I call him the next day, Mr. Mantell, I'll be in Chicago tomorrow.
I love it.
So drove to Chicago, met with him, and he loved the idea, but had some reservations, and basically said, look, we're a solid organization. We don't take big gambles. What if we spend the money to hire you and bring you on and it doesn't work? And I said, what if I raise the budget for my own salary for the first year until it proves itself?
Oh my God.
Wow. That was creative.
Yeah. So
yeah,
he said, well, we don't really do that at World Vision. And I said, well, You gave me a problem, I gave you a solution.
Wow.
And
I
so
love it. Yeah.
by the grace of God, over the next few months, Mike Mantell was convinced. The woman who ended up being my manager, Amber Johnson, was convinced, and they brought me on. And so January 2006, I became the first Team World Vision staff person
Mm-hmm.
with no idea how to do the job I had just convinced them to hire me for.
But that's important too, right? That's
Yeah.
such, you were so excited about the
Yeah.
challenge. You didn't have to know all the answers,
Yeah.
but you definitely knew the end goal. You knew what you wanted to do. You didn't know how you were going to get there, but you knew the end goal.
But see, that's the thing too. And and sorry, Michael, I just muted you a little just because for some reason I think when Nicole talks, there's a little background. But I just like that to me with that. I mean, that story, first of all, is like fascinating to me because first of all, like there's so many things I want to say about it. So I'm gonna have to like, hold myself back. But first of all, the fact that like when it is purpose, when there is something that it's like you just feel like you've like have to do it almost like there's it just because it clicks so much that then you're willing to all of a sudden there's a confidence that's associated with that. That's not just confidence because like, you're an ex-football player or whatever, but it's like confidence because it's almost like you like you're meant for this. So you start to almost like this other side of you starts to come out. But the other part I love about your story is that, a lot of the times as people are trying to figure this out and trying to like, it's all about what careers are out there, what job descriptions are out there. It's like, oh, I want to do this, but there's no roles like that, or nobody's trying to do like you literally created a position for yourself. And then now share like how that like manifested, because then not only did you create it, but like now it then actually like grew. So go ahead and share now the aftermath of that.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, the confidence piece, I will say there was a lot of fear involved. I remember a very clear day. So my wife was still in grad school. We kind of knew we wanted to move to Chicago down the road, but this was going to mean quitting my job and moving to Chicago ahead of her while she finished grad school. We'd been married 5 years. We're going to live in separate cities for 4 or 5 months, see each other on the weekends. And I remember sitting in our kitchen crying about like, how are we going to do this? Right? How are we going to make this work? And then day one, I sat down. I didn't know what I was doing. Day 3, a guy took me to lunch, one of the big fundraisers at World Vision at the time. And he said, tell me about this idea. And I told him the idea, and he looked at me and said, it'll never work.
Wow.
And then this is my third day on the job. Then he proceeded to tell me all the reasons why it wouldn't work.
Wow.
Thank God this guy came around. He wound up being one of my biggest supporters and was at all the events. But the first week on the job, that's what it looked like. The first year, we got 100 people to run the Chicago Marathon, and we raised about $100,000. So not a lot of money. But that guy that hired me, Mike Mantell, ran, and several other leaders in the organization ran, and they all had a life-changing experience like I'd had.
Wow.
And it clicked with them, and they said, all right, we're going to give this guy some room. So I was very protected, like in a bubble for 4 or 5 years at World Vision, this global humanitarian organization. I'm like a little startup band. I'm like the garage band in mom and dad's, mom and dad are paying the bills.
Right.
He really guarded and protected me in those early years. And I remember he said, make everyone feel like a rock star and they'll keep coming back. So over those first 3 years, we grew to become the biggest charity at the Chicago Marathon. It took a long time. A few years in, they let me hire a couple people. Then they let me hire a couple more. And we started growing Team World Vision across the country. And within about 10 or 12 years, we had just over 25 staff on Team World Vision. Running races. We'd become the biggest charity at multiple marathons around the U.S. I shared a bit yesterday, a large part of my journey has been tied to grief. So following the loss of my dad, I lost both of my older brothers and then eventually my mom. So that by the time I was 45, I was the last person in my birth family. My brothers died young, 38 and 45 years old, both left 4 kids behind. And I share that because I do think that shaped the urgency for me, that we are not promised tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so we better get busy with today, right? And that shapes how I view my career, but also shapes how I live my life as a husband and father and as a friend, to really just leave it all out every day, right? So
yeah. And so did those experiences, did they like further have you like kind of sink into what you were doing, or how did, and I think you said your book is mostly centered around like grief as
Grief.
well, right? So
yeah,
how did those like that shape you
yeah,
or shift your purpose if it did?
I think the following the loss of my dad, and then losing my brothers in the years that followed, really realized that there is more pain in this life for me than I ever could have imagined. Like, before losing my dad, the biggest heartache I had was a girl breaking up with me, right? And losing my dad shattered me. So I realized there is more pain in this life than I ever imagined. Then I realized I'm only 25. There's a lot more pain ahead, right? This is just the first time I'm experiencing pain. There's a lot more ahead. My travels to other countries made me realize that there are other people who face pain that is unimaginable, right? Right now, there are more people living in slavery than at any point in human history. There are mothers walking across a desert who are refugees, leaving their home country in search of a safe place that will welcome them. They may lose one or two of their kids along the way, and they'll never go home. They'll never have a home to return to. There are communities I've visited where the child mortality rates are 50%, meaning that half of the kids will die before age 5. Right. So as we spend time so those two realities, there's more pain in this world for me than I ever imagined. Others face unimaginable pain. And then the third thing is there's often very little we can do about our own pain, but there's always something we can do to relieve the pain of others. And I say that meaning like I am pro counseling, I'm pro therapy, I'm pro self-care, all those things. There are some things we can do to deal with our own pain. But at the end of the day, we are going to have pain. And that's why I said we're made for each other. The thing that I have found is the most healing for me. The temptation as a human being is to turn inward on myself and throw a pity party. Why am I the only one of my friends that lost their whole family? Why am I the only one? Why am I, why me? And it's easy to turn inward, but if we can take that and turn it outward and focus on the pain of others, that's actually where we find healing, I think.
And yeah, would you say that because you had more of because you were pretty anchored in a sense of purpose early on, that did help you with, just navigating that grief?
I think there's all sorts of things. When we talk about, when people talk about what privilege means, to me, I'm as privileged as they come. I had a family that was rooted in faith. I never questioned for a single day in my life if my parents or my brothers loved me, right? So I was well loved. I have friendships that are deep and enduring. My best friend from first grade is still my best friend. I've had friends and mentors. So I have all these people that have helped root me in what matters in the world.
Right.
And so I do think that, I will say it all got flipped upside down when my dad died. I'd been taught through my faith that, pray for healing and he'll be healed. And, God wants good things for you. He doesn't want to hurt you.
Uh-oh.
I think, sorry, that was an alarm going off. I don't know what it's telling me to do.
Battery died.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Now.
Oh,
He's got to turn it off first.
Can you hear me, Danielle?
Yeah.
I cannot hear you.
Do you want
No.
to? Is it any different now?
Well, shoot, you might have to. Let me see what happened here.
You want to rejoin?
Oh no, I'm so sorry, my friends.
Well, we can talk amongst ourselves, even Nicole. You can
You're
hear us?
back.
I
You
don't
can
know what
hear us.
happened. Sorry.
Oh, look.
Technical difficulties.
Don't worry, we're using a whole new technology platform today, and we're
Yeah.
still
Just
trying to
blame it on
figure it
that.
out.
So yeah, I think all I can say is it's nothing to my own accord. It's the people around me and by God's grace that I've been able to find purpose in pain and in heartache and do what I can to try to recover. And you don't get over losses like those. You just kind of learn to live through them. And,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mike,
Well,
you have
you said
so
something
many.
interesting. Oh.
Sorry, Danny.
Go ahead, Nicole.
You have so many, and it's just because we've known each other for so many years too. And I know how others really look to you, right? And I know how they see you. I know how they, look up to you or inspired by you. And I'm certain that many people come to you because they feel like they are stuck. They feel like they're not sure. They're not sure if they've really gone down the right path from a career perspective. They are not sure if they are getting that kind of fulfillment in life. They see the relationship that you and Danny have, and they probably are asking questions sometimes like, how do I go about this process? How do I start to uncover more about, my purpose and living a fuller life, more intentional? And what do you usually say to them? What does that conversation look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I have a simple formula, but it certainly does happen. It's if I weren't doing this, being a dream coach would be something that I think is exciting. I think I get to do that sometimes as
A dream coach, did you say?
yeah,
Or like a dream coach, like what do you mean?
yeah, a dream coach to people, like helping people pursue their dreams, right?
Yeah.
And
Love that.
so when my friendships, when it's a close friend, I think we can enter into long-term, encouragement and dialogue about what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually, so this is, we're still working out what this is going to look like. But, I work, the organization I lead now, Marillac St. Vincent Family Services. I came in because I felt I had something to offer. They were looking for their next CEO. We hadn't had a strategic plan in over 10 years. We're a 100-year-old organization, 170 staff, no strategic plan. And we have, some staff morale and culture things, coming out of COVID. Our work is hard work. People, serving families living in poverty. Often our staff have experienced poverty themselves or are. And so one of the ways we're addressing kind of culture shift here is looking at ways we can invest in the dreams of our staff. And what does that look like to, even if it takes them away from us,
Wow.
right? Even if it takes them somewhere else, but how do we help them figure out what their purpose is?
Wow.
So I think, as a friend, one book I did read, and I don't even know if it would speak to me the same way, but back when I was on this journey, I read a book called The Dream Giver by Bruce Wilkinson. And it's like an allegory, but they name people in that book. They have border bullies and border busters. And like it's all about this character who's leaving the town of comfortable to pursue his dream. And along the way, he meets these different characters. And one of the characters he meets are these border bullies. And these are the folks that tell you it's not going to work. Right. They're the ones that discourage you. And the hardest thing, I used to tell people this when we would convince people to run a marathon for Team World Vision, I would prep them for border bullies because they are usually the people closest to you.
Yeah.
And when you start to share a dream with people, you have to be very aware that someone's going to shoot it down. And sometimes it's going to be someone you love that shoots it down.
Yeah.
And sometimes the people that are going to encourage you come from the strangest places. And so kind of prepping people for some of the emotion of that and stepping through fear. I've adapted a quote that it's not my quote, but I use it all the time. I've adapted it that almost every amazing thing God has for us in this life is on the other side of fear. and we have to step through fear to get to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Absolutely.
so that it goes back the question my mentor asked me, what do you really want to do that you're afraid to say?
Well, first of all, I just have to just acknowledge one of the things you said in there, which was that you encourage your staff to go after their dreams, even if it means them leaving your organization, which I think says so much, because when people feel like their best interest is really that you, as a leader, you really have their best interest. You care about their life for the long haul, not just what they're doing for you, while they're working for you, but that you, I think that just says so much. And I feel like people stay, ironically, they want to stay in an organization, right, that has that kind of intention for them. But I know we have to wrap up. I'd love to end on just, maybe you just sharing, why is this important? Why is it important that people focus on this? What are just your final words for why spending the time or having the patience for figuring out their purpose is worth it?
Yeah. Well, I think the world needs more people who are coming alive.
Yes.
Right. It is contagious to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. People see you doing it, and if you may have some people shooting you down, but you're going to have other people coming alive too, and wanting to take part in that. One of the awesome things with the Dream of Team World Vision was the hundreds of thousands of people that wound up running marathons with us, tens of thousands, because.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
What's that?
Yes, Michael did that for me, right? I was not a marathon runner. Are you kidding? But to your point, Michael, you came alive. I saw your energy. I saw how you were talking about it with people. And you brought me to this place because I never envisioned myself ever running a marathon in my life. But Danny and I did it side by side together. And that was my first one. And then I did 3 more after. But you put me in a place that was so uncomfortable because I never thought or imagined doing it before. But you gave me that sense of purpose that we need to stand behind this. This is really important. So I watched you come alive in front of so many people and bringing them on board to this amazing opportunity. And so many people, it was the first time running a marathon before in their life, which was incredible.
Thanks so much, Nicole, for sharing that. It, as you were sharing, maybe a good thought to end on. I've talked a lot about Dr. Ron Brown today. He's an amazing guy who really influenced me a lot during kind of that dreaming stuff. One of the things I did name as a future goal was to write a book. Right. And at the time, I thought it was going to be about weight loss because I just lost all this weight from running. But I remember him asking me, what's the worst scenario you can imagine about writing this book? What's the thing you're most afraid of about writing a book? And I said, the worst thing I can imagine is that I'm going to spend hundreds or thousands of hours writing a book and no one will ever read it. And he said, that is absolutely not the worst thing that could happen. He said, the worst thing that could happen is that you never write the book.
Oh, I love that. Wow.
So I think that's, if I could say anything to people, it's just this sense of urgency that we have one life. We're not guaranteed next week, next year. And so I think if people aren't already thinking about their purpose and what they're here on this earth to do and what makes them come alive, today's the day to start, right?
I love that.
That's perfect. Come alive, write your story.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. This is a really, really, it really is just your story really is fascinating. And just thank you for what you do and the impact that you're making, because obviously you've got a major ripple in terms of just the work that you've done through the organizations that you've worked with, but then just obviously you as a person and your leadership to the people around you and your family, I'm sure. It's just so inspiring. So really appreciate you being here and having this conversation, inspiring hopefully more people to go on their own journey. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, both of you.
Absolutely, Michael. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right, guys.
Bye to you both. Have a nice rest of your week.
Have a great week. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye.